And now back to your regular programming.
If you speak better to yourself.
You showed up for probably the dumbest conversation we've ever had on this show.
Let's have that smile again.
Tell me how that happens. Physically should not happen.
Relax.
If you say
Give me as well.
3 times a day, God will line it up.
He's just an absolute hack, and he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to Hack City. Joe DeLeone, Sean Anderson, 2 former college football players from the University of Rhode Island, and today we're going to be talking about the JJ McCarthy buzz. Are we in on it? Are we out on that? We're also going to react to the concerning but also kind of hilarious news surrounding Shohei Ohtani's gambling situation with his interpreter. That's going to be coming up. And then we're also just going to share some general stupid meathead thoughts on March Madness, certain guys that we think should be playing football instead of basketball. We'll get to that later on in today's show. Before we get to it, though, Sean, I don't know about you, but I have already dove in deep in on the betting sphere of making up for my terrible bracket. I was watching very closely as Duquesne was trying to cut their 30-point deficit down for them to cover. That bet did not hit. My Texas bet did hit. My Creighton bet did hit, but we're not doing so good right now on BetOnline.
We're maybe breaking even, and that's all you can hope for in March Madness. Look, the tournament is here. BetOnline is your bracket headquarters for this season, with the bracket contests out there and odds and lines and info at every game, every round, right up until the national championship. You can access all of it. BetOnline. Head to BetOnline today. Get in on everything. Remember to use promo code BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus in your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. All you can hope to do in March Madness is come out a little bit on top. All right, because you're going to get shafted every now and then, and that's just chalk it up to the game. You're going to get mad about getting shafted in March Madness. You think you're the first person? You're not. All right, so we're all just going to try to stay positive and really hope that some of these underdogs can cover.
I don't mean to cut you off. Did you see that an ESPN betting analyst on one of their new betting shows made a very ridiculous comment that they said that whatever their pick was a riskless short-term investment. That was how they described it. Is that not a little concerning that a large media entity not known for sports betting that typically reports and covers news was making a statement
financial advice? Yeah. I wonder who
phrasing
watches
bets
ESPN.
is that.
Yeah. Maybe that attitude is why some athletes are getting caught up because they are seeing it as investment and not just gambling time with your bros, cracking a couple cold ones, watching the games, watching just an electric Creighton Oregon matchup at the
That
bars
was a great game.
night. I mean, everyone's having a good night. You're kind of just tuning into the game, watching. You know, you got some friends with bets on, and then you get overtime, and the whole bar's locked in. Then you get double overtime, and then everybody's ready to fight each other because we're too fired up. Had to leave before double overtime. Looked like trouble was coming, but just electric.
Yeah, that had to have been midnight for you, right? Damn.
Oh yeah. It was a little late.
The full quote before we get into our first topic today was, you know what? This was from Aaron Dolan of ESPN talking to Reese Davis. You know what? Some would call this wagering gambling. The way you've sold this, I think what it is a risk-free investment. That is a really problematic statement to be making on a news reporting
that's a terrible statement to make. You got to understand, and this is why ESPN can't jump into it, because they don't know the terms that gamblers lose. It's lock, mortal lock, a nuke play. You know, there are terms where you say, I really like this pick without jinxing it, or I really hate this pick without jinxing it. But all without saying, hey, you're going to be able to pay your mortgage if you make this bet. Nobody ever says that. All right. It's just, hey, this is the play, because we don't want to be responsible for somebody going overboard. But making that kind of statement at that company is a huge no-no. How could that be good?
Whose ear do I need to get into at CNN so that we can start running betting segments? I think
All
we've
right.
already crossed the line of what's problematic and what's not. Let's just dive all the way in. Let's just go all the way in.
Enough with the market. Let's get to our other financial correspondent, Mr. Joe DeLeone. Tell us how everybody in this fluctuating economy, we might be going to hyperinflation soon. How would you fix it? Oh yeah, give me the Zags by 5. Can we do that? You do that, and maybe you can survive. You can get some bread for your
If you
family.
place this 17 leg parlay, you're going to be able to get out of the debt that you're currently facing. Now this is going to need to hit. So you got to hit all of the perfect bets here. And this is how we're going to go about doing it.
People forget about the S&P, forget about everything else, all right? You just got to get on to ESPN Bet, and then we're going to start rolling in everybody. And now, abandon your 401k, retirement. You could retire tomorrow if you hit this bet. Who says that?
I know, that's terrible. I mean, like that, I don't know how that's legal. That's a discussion for a completely different day. Speaking of a risk-free investment that some people consider to be one, is JJ McCarthy, the former Michigan quarterback who is in the 2024 NFL draft. He is currently being projected to be one of the top 4 quarterbacks selected in this year's draft. If anything, at this point, it's pretty much confirmed that he will be at least the 4th taken, and there's some deliberation that this guy could go up to being the 3rd or maybe even 2nd. Small likelihood that part happens, but the 4th seems to be the most potentially impactful move that could happen for him. Now, this does also rely on maybe the Minnesota Vikings trade up. Do they do that, make that trade in order to go and get JJ McCarthy? It has been the biggest talking point, it feels like, in the draft world, and more importantly, the sports world. This is the point that we've gotten to where we're spending less time on Jaden Daniels and on Drake May, and all of it seemingly on JJ McCarthy, because he is such a controversial prospect to talk about. So I wanted to talk about here where we sit, less from an NFL draft lens and more just from a lens of, we've watched this guy play for a couple of years. He was a part of a national championship winning team. Is the results that he put on the field enough for us to buy into him as somebody who could save a franchise and be a full-time, long-term starter for 5 to 10 years for a certain franchise?
Michigan wouldn't let him throw to win games against Big Ten opponents. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know, Joe. Why wasn't he torching it in college? It's so much different to look at it as like, oh, we're taking a massive chance on this kid for potential. And then, oh, but, he played some. He didn't have control of the offense. It's so different than a guy that lit it up and then might burn you in the NFL just because he may not be talented enough. Like Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, they might have that issue where, we kind of peaked out, but look what we did in college. We were fantastic, electric, and we torched all these teams and these players. Who did he torch? Who did he dominate through the air in college? Do you think it's going to get easier in the NFL? It can't be. It's tighter coverage. I don't think he can throw to his left. And the big pro day throw that everyone's glazing themselves about. What is
Zach Wilson-esque.
What does that throw remind you? Exactly. Zach Wilson-esque. Why do we keep doing this at pro days? Why? I saw him. I've seen enough. And if he burns me and he goes and becomes a savior in Minnesota, okay. But that is so far away from the realm of possibility in my mind that I'm not worried about it. I mean, maybe he goes and has a couple athletic plays wherever he lands, gets himself to start maybe for 2 years. But that's it. That's where it is. I'm not trying to knock him because I think that his journey with the mental health and athletics, and he's taking a different approach, and people call it corny. I get it. Sports can be stressful. Some people just don't have that bug in them to just not care as much. He seems to care. He seems to like sports. He's a national champion, but he didn't have control, and he didn't torch anybody. It doesn't make sense to me. It feels like a lot of smokescreen out there.
Well, okay, so first of all, I don't think that this is smokescreen. I think that there is legitimate smoke. And the reason why is that the NFL does this every cycle. Big, tall, white guy who won important games and was on a winning team, maybe a national championship winning team. Yeah, they can move and throw on the run. If you boil him down to his most simple traits, he is exactly what the NFL tries to find with developmental guys. He's exactly that. I think that there's a world that he could be successful, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but I just want to reiterate what you just said. I completely agree on your aspect of this, where I, at least for a guy who's raw and maybe didn't throw that much in college and maybe wasn't the most important player on their offense, I'd at least like to see and have examples of that guy taking over games. When everything wasn't working, was there at least one instance? All I'm asking for is one instance where he had to be the reason why they won. And because their run game was so good, and actually more importantly, when he was struggling, they just turned to the run game and they kept running the football. And was why they succeeded. Exactly my point. Here's a good example. CJ Stroud had a lot of really good games, but there was a stretch where he was struggling, and then there was a lot of speculation on, is this guy really worthy of being maybe the first quarterback taken in this upcoming draft? But he still took over the Georgia game. And that to me was an example, a tangible example where you could go, okay, look, this is if he hits a ceiling and he plays as good as he could, this is what he can do. It just feels very, and I keep comparing him to Daniel Jones, it feels very Daniel Jones-esque, where it's like, oh my God, look at all these things that this guy can do. Let's not pay attention to the games that he was playing in and what he was called upon to do so, but just like, let's boil him down to this athlete and ask him to go out there and play. At least Anthony Richardson, here's another really good example. Anthony Richardson took over the game against Utah. In one of his early starts in his career, he couldn't find anybody to throw to. That Florida team roster was dog shit. It was terrible. And you know what he did? He put the team on his back as a runner, and he barreled into the end zone, and he picked up all these huge plays. He was the reason why they won, because he found a way to win. I don't have those examples with JJ McCarthy, which is why I just have so much hesitation on buying into that this kid is going to work.
Yeah, I go back to like guys like Trubisky, where you have, there are gripes about, oh, he only played 13 games, whatever it is. But in the 13 games, you still saw him and his traits, and somebody was stupid enough to really buy in that high. And then conversely, you look at a guy like Trey Lance, who before his senior, he only played one game, but we actually saw him dominated in the competition at the FCS level. So you and I we both knew he was an NFL quarterback. And the 49ers took a risk taking him at 3. It was a risk, but they had enough evidence of saying, wow, look at what he's doing to all these other athletes on the field. He's clearly a grade above the non-NFL guys. It makes sense. And making a pick makes sense to me is way more important than all the other stuff. If I can sit here and say, oh, I can see where you got there. I don't see where anybody is getting to the point of drafting JJ McCarthy in the first round. I just don't. How could I? He looks like Zach Wilson. He plays like Daniel Jones. He can sometimes run. He puts the ball in harm's way. There's the negatives are the first things you think about instead of, oh, JJ McCarthy, team leader, national champion. That tells me what I need to know about him. The eyes don't lie, right, Joe? How could they at this point? We've seen him.
Well, okay, so here's where I get really held up, and it pains me to say this. And I was actually just on a Vikings podcast, and I said this past week, that despite all my concerns, because of where he fits in this equation, he's going to land in the best situation. He is going to get the best starting location out of any of the quarterbacks in this class, because arguably, except maybe Caleb Williams, because they're clearly spending the money. They have all the draft capital that they need to like hit the ground running. But Jaden Daniels is going to go to the Commanders, who their offensive line's messy, their defense is empty. Man. The Patriots, if they take Drake May or Jaden Daniels, their offense has nobody. They've got like a couple good running backs and Owenu, and like that's the extent of it. So I look at the Vikings, they've got a really good general manager. Kevin O'Connell is a really brilliant offensive coordinator. And more importantly, Sam Darnold's good enough that he can start this whole upcoming next year. And then the Vikings hand the torch off to JJ McCarthy, and they're probably going to continue to have a really good offensive line, a really good defense. and some really good offensive weapons, assuming that you could keep Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison happy and still staying in Minnesota. So there is a really, and this is the frustrating part about this, where we can have this take that we don't buy into JJ McCarthy, but at the same time, there's this likelihood that he ends up in Minnesota. And because that's the perfect situation for any of these guys, he has a ridiculously good start to his career. There is a lot of potential for that to happen, which makes it just such a confusing direction to reflect on and to postulate what could possibly go wrong or go right.
It's so frustrating because I don't know. He's maybe he's in my top 10 quarterbacks for this class. Maybe. I mean, I might have G5 guys ahead of him.
Okay. Now you're just saying shit.
I'm not
being ridiculous.
Shit, I don't. I think he's going to choke at the NFL. I don't think it's going to go well. And then he's going to make a couple sweet plays that look good. And then we're going to get another Justin Fields situation where he's a little bit exciting at times when he's not throwing back-breaking interceptions where the team and the fan base don't want to let go. Sometimes it's time to let go. And I don't think that he's going to be a guy that could be at a place for 6 years before you really have to start making big money decisions. I think it's going to be 3 teams, lifetime backup, maybe 30 starts.
Well, you're a lot lower on him than I am. I think that there is potential for it to work out. I'm just very cautious. Like the risk needs to be acknowledged. And I think that there's a lot of NFL fans, especially Vikings fans, that are overlooking that risk. Dude, like I've posted a couple videos on JJ McCarthy on this channel. One of the most recent ones where I posted why the Giants shouldn't take him because they're rumored, and they brought him in for like a visit very recently. And I've got comments saying that like, well, he could be Tom Brady. Tom Brady was at Michigan. And it's like, those are not the same, man. We can't, there are so many stark differences.
We're trying to predict Tom Brady's.
I guess. I mean, I couldn't think of one. Was
Bernard Robinson Tom Brady?
Right. You're never going to have another Tom Brady because Tom Brady was
you can't pick them out. You can't pick who is going to, you don't know who's going to be Brady or Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. You just don't. But all you could do is give yourself a chance by drafting a guy.
But by the way, did you see someone 247 Sports did like a podcast episode with some guy and they dropped this list where it was like the top 25 draft prospects of all time. And it wasn't like what you would expect where it'd be like Calvin Johnson, Jamarcus Russell. Yeah.
All the greats.
Number 1 was Tom Brady on this list. And then like there were other guys, I'm trying to remember who else. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice. It was the most and I refuse to have listened to this episode because the list.
Was Davion Clowney on the list?
No,
he wasn't. It's a bad list.
But the absurdity of this list that the premise basically was like, hey man, I've got really good hindsight. We looked back at this
bullshit. No one's claiming Javon Curse, and he was insane. Cameron Wembley was insane. There are some true athletic freaks that have come through and been huge prospects, and now it's a hindsight list. You stink. That stinks. Awful.
It was so stupid, but it was
off. Nobody knows what they're doing.
So typical in 2024 list making graphics and the sports media sphere. All right,
I got their wish by having me yell. That's exactly. I got baited. I'm the Rube. I'll be the Rube.
I want to talk about the Shohei Ohtani news that broke this past weekend. We didn't talk about it on Thursday. It's a very strange story that has had multiple twists and turns since the original headline. How do you pronounce his interpreter's name, by the way? You feel like you'd be able to better. It's in the doc.
Oh,
Ipepe Mizuhara. Is that how you say it?
Ipe Mizuhara.
Ipe Mizuhara.
Yeah.
So the news that broke is that Mizuhara, who is Shohei Ohtani, the elite MLB baseball player from Japan, who has been unbelievable. Yes. His interpreter was the original statement, stole $4.5 million from Ohtani in order to cover his gambling bets. What has slowly developed, and there has not been clarification, and there's supposed to be a Monday statement released from Ohtani that apparently he had generously and knowingly gave money to his interpreter in order to cover his gambling bets with an illegal bookkeeping service just to be a good
Just use
friend.
Bet Online.
Yeah, just I texted somebody. I was like, I wonder if this was Bet Online. But that action though is actually illegal. It is illegal to wire somebody money to pay off their gambling bets, and it's also an MLB. It's an MLB rule violation because you can't have association with an illegal sports bettor.
Yeah,
there is a lot of wild speculation, and especially because of the language barrier that is going to be created in all this, that Shohei Ohtani was using his interpreter to place bets in order to, if this ever came down where there was some sort of federal involvement where they started to look into it, that he could fall on the sword for Shohei Ohtani and the interpreter would take the blame. Since then, though, what has made this really even more confusing is that Mizuhara has been ousted as not attending the university that he claimed to have attended, which was UC Riverside. He's from the Los Angeles area. And then also on top of this, claimed he had worked for the Red Sox before he headed to Japan, and that was where he met Ohtani. The Red Sox released a statement saying he has never worked for the organization. So there is a lot of misinformation going on right now. There's a lot of confusion. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of guessing who's in the right or the wrong. But like, what was your just general reaction to this?
I think that first of all, the Red Sox, if he was there, then that's such a MLB team thing to do, where he might have been hired by an external contracting company to do it, and the Red Sox never had him on our books. That doesn't mean Boston, calm down. You were lucky to get by during the Astros nonsense. You got by pretty scot-free, losers. Oh my God. But it's terrible. The Shohei news is awful because he's the face of the sport. He's the best thing that baseball has had going for it in the last decade, really. I mean, that's what it is. Jeter's retirement, sure, cool. A-Rod saga, whatever. No, we haven't seen anything like Shohei Ohtani before. Just in our generation. So he's the coolest. He's also the best. And now you're getting mixed up with whatever this nonsense is. And it is nonsense. Because I listened to Jeff Passan on McAfee. He was talking about it. He said none of the bets were placed on baseball, which is huge for me. If you're not betting on baseball in baseball, then maybe let you slide. Manfred's a disaster. Their leadership's a disaster. No one knows what they're doing in the MLB. But they're going to keep him on the field. How could you not? They're smart enough to know that. He is going to be playing for the Dodgers. Maybe not opening day, but I think he plays the majority of the season when this thing gets cleared out and figured out. And if that means that Ipe has to, relieve his services as that's the situation. But when I didn't see in the initial report that there was MLB betting involved, that's fine. Betting on your own sport, cardinal rule, cardinal sin. Don't do it. All this other stuff, I think the U.S. is starting to have a problem with the way that sports gambling is affecting the actual sports.
Okay, so I don't agree with that because I think that, and this needs to always be brought up when there is some sort of a betting scandal that occurs. Because of the prevalence of sports betting and how more easily accessible it is online, you're no longer going through your friend of a friend's guy that's placing bets for you, and then you have to pay off whatever you elicited for said bet. There are no backdoor channels. It is not through cash. It is not through those types of payments. A lot of these, even illegal bookkeeping services, or even people that do operate as bookies, have some sort of online portal that they operate through. That is how advanced that this stuff has gotten. And I think it has become more easily traceable by the federal government. And that's why things like this are going to get reported on more often. I would actually argue, I think what makes this whole thing so goddamn stupid is that California almost had legal sports betting. And it should have legal sports betting. But this state is self-righteous and they think that they're so great and that they're, the leading force in the country of doing the right thing. And for whatever reason, they didn't want to legalize sports betting. I would argue that if it was legal, that this story would have gone a lot more differently. And I think that we probably would have caught it sooner. And I think it wouldn't have gotten to this magnitude. To take the less serious approach and my general dumbass thought on this, though, I find it really comedically stupid. Like, it feels like a Seinfeld episode because the guy doesn't really speak English.
Yeah.
So we're playing telephone with this whole goddamn thing. Nobody, I don't know. And we're not, and Shohei, it is like the perfect, easy way to kind of get out of this, of Shohei being able to play dumb during this whole thing and just be like, I was telling him one thing. I don't think he just did the other. I told him no, and he interpreted that apparently as yes. It's almost like a ventriloquist act where the interpreter, was theoretically just using his power that he was given to make these decisions. That's the way that it can be portrayed.
It could be, but we all know body language, and we can read people. But I mean, yeah, you say it's not a problem, but just off the top of my mind here, I just wrote down a little list here of athletes getting caught up just recently since it's been illegal. Shohei, Keishawn Butte, Jamison Williams, other Lions players. Iowa had a scandal. Iowa State had a scandal. The Alabama baseball coach, Brad Bohannon, that was a huge scandal. Calvin Ridley, and that's just off the top of the head. I'm sure there's more major ones that I'm forgetting, but that's a lot. That's a lot since it's been initiated, where another investigation. How are we still getting athletes caught up? Everyone's just saying, don't gamble on sports. Don't do this. Don't do that. You can't stop if it's this accessible. And I know the Alabama baseball guy did it at a sports book at a baseball stadium in Cincinnati. I know that, but still, that's more than at least what was being covered up beforehand. That's a lot of dudes and people being brought to light.
Okay,
just signing up for FanDuel.
Here is, I don't know if this is like a totally replicable example. It's just like pre-social media, how guys could have problematic beliefs on things unless he was handed a microphone and asked his thoughts on like certain things. You're not going to really know if certain guys are racist or sexist or homophobic because those questions weren't typically asked. But nowadays, there's so many microphones, there's so many phones out, there's also so many easily screenshotable text messages that anytime an athlete or a public figure does something inappropriate or makes a statement in closed doors, it is easily released in any situation. So my whole point is that technology has turned this into a circus. It has created an environment where, not a circus, it's just created an environment where it's so much more easily to be held accountable.
I do think that athletes should have to deal with a higher level of scrutiny when it comes to bookkeeping. No pun intended. With their, if they are gambling, like it should be, because it's almost insider trading. And if you look at it, like if you're working in the government and you are making investments, you have to disclose those investments like as soon as you make them, show that you don't have a correlation, and get those investments cleared, so you're not accused of insider trading. Like your whole family has to do that, or at least super direct family. This it's just wild, free range. There's no check-in unless you get caught up. And dudes are getting caught up. People are getting caught up. It needs to be stricter, or else then the sanctity of the sports is going to keep on dropping. Because eventually we're going to have the big scandal where someone does bet on himself in that season, or bets against his team, starts throwing the game, and they're kicked out. That's fine. But building up the integrity of a sports league is huge. Boxing became a joke because every match was fixed. That's what it was. That's the whole stigma about boxing, is that it was fixed no matter what. Go down in the third. You think they're just making that shit up for the movies? Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's cool, but you can't. You got to draw upon it, so there's some realism. There has to be. We're just flowing, in my opinion, to the big one, and I don't want the big one to happen.
I mean, I would just argue. Well, like a good example too is that the whole Michael Jordan speculation, was never confirmable. There was no way. We have actual technology to prove that these actions are happening because they are tracked.
I'll admit that if Jordan was doing what he was doing, Now maybe we're looking at a way different story with the whole situation. We wouldn't all be in the dark. We wouldn't be in the dark.
We wouldn't be guessing. Like, oh, why did he retire? No, it'd be Michael Jordan caught placing bets on DraftKings. That's what it would have been. It would have been a completely different talking point. All right, Sean, I want to wrap us up here on today's show. Talking about just general thoughts on March Madness. My main takeaway here is that DJ Burns, the NC State big man who has been really good. He's played really well. He was pivotal for their win over Oakland and for NC State having this run as an 11 seed. Mm-hmm. My only thought on this guy, man, he is 6'9". He is 275 pounds. He might be a little closer to 280 the way that he's built. He has been really nice in college. How is this man not playing right tackle for the NC State football team? This man has the feet, he's got the frame, and he's got the length to be a really good right tackle. Now, I don't know if maybe he's also pretty physical. Normally sometimes you get these big guys that play basketball and you think like, he didn't want to play football because he didn't like getting hit. My man's going to war with these dudes. He's not afraid to fight. I think DJ Burns, we need to make this man a football player.
He moves like a great offensive lineman. The way that his body control is fantastic. That's why I think that if you're a lineman, in the offseason, you should play basketball because you get better footwork and then you get great body control. It's such an asset. So, and he also wouldn't be the first basketball player to go and convert into the NFL. Most recently, we see Mo Alley Cox. We see guys
most of them are tight ends, though,
or defensive ends. This guy could get on the line. He definitely could. He's got good reach. I think he's mean. He's physical. He's basketball mean, which is different than football mean. Way different. Yeah. Who's the tight end on Michigan State that also is it Malik Carr maybe that also plays basketball for them? Like there's I'm pretty sure they have a tight end that does that. But Burns, I think, is made of that. He's cut from that cloth where he could dual sport, and he could have dual sported his entire college career. And if an NFL team is smart enough, they will sign him on as a project, teach him football, and we could be looking at a really good offensive lineman.
I just don't understand. I think it is Malik Carr that you're saying was the
and he's a great athlete on the field. He's it's been Michigan State, which has not been that great lately, but he's every time he gets the ball, it looks great. Yeah, he looks super athletic.
I don't know, man. Dave Doran needs to pick up the phone and he needs to get this man to play to get him a helmet. I think that you could totally develop that kid into a really good right tackle. Or I stupidly tweeted. I mean, he could also end up being a really good 3-4 defensive end. I mean, he's got the height and the length to do it. General thoughts from you before we close out on March Madness. I don't care about the games. I just care about that this man needs to be playing football.
My general thoughts are, there's not a big bad right now, and that makes March Madness way more interesting. When Kentucky's really good, when Duke is really good, that's when March Madness is really great. If Kansas is great or Gonzaga, you need a number one that lost like 1 to 2 games all year, and then you're rooting for the upsets. Like that Oakland upset over Kentucky, I didn't really care because Kentucky stinks this year. Who cared? It didn't matter. It didn't faze me. 14 seed, yeah. No, it was like, oh yeah, they had a guy that could shoot threes really well, and he hit a shot. And Kentucky, they stink. Or they stink for Kentucky standards, so I get it. So I need a big bad. Like UConn, I may have gone to BetOnline, place a little wager on UConn to take it home again, but they're not a big bad. They're UConn. They
don't feel as dangerous as everyone's kind of been painting them. I don't know why.
I'm not sure either. It's been fun. I was not invested as much this year, and then as I'm watching, I'm realizing, oh God, yeah, this is starting to get exciting. And then there's great parity in college basketball. It feels like all the games are close. Unless we're getting some of those 1 versus 16 blowouts, like Purdue's beat the hell out of some team today. But unless it's like that, it feels like man, all these teams have a good 5 to 7 players, and the transfer portal may have helped that. I'm looking at it like maybe some of this is pretty good.
There's been a couple pretty ugly blowouts though. That have that kind of made it a little boring, but no, I think the transfer portal, if it has worked in one sport, it has worked in basketball. There's some guys that could go on to play for like 6 years if they wanted to by just taking some NIL money. And then they probably won't have NBA careers because it's just such a weirdly unique sport where sometimes the best college guys don't go into play and do much in the NBA. Go ahead. What are you saying?
And but I also watching this, it is making me feel like why, all the rumblings about messing with the tournament and expanding. I'm like, no, we can't expand it anymore.
Yeah.
We can't touch the tournament. We can't touch it because it is truly great. Because you're standing in the bar and you know that you're a fraud, and you know that, out of the 6 people next to you, 5 of them are frauds also, and there's one diehard college basketball fan. I'd say 1 out of 7 dudes is really into college basketball, or at least one team. But everyone's on this. Everyone's interested. Everyone's invested, and you're just like, why would I get in an argument in the bar when there's just this feast of entertainment right in front of me?
Yeah.
I can just have a good time. It's so healthy for the country to have this tournament as it is, that messing with it would feel really un-American.
It would feel dirty.
It does not sit right with me. Don't touch it. And we're all getting a reminder at a crucial time before you go making decisions in the summer. Let's remember how much fun we're having with this perfect tournament design before we go fucking it up again.
Expand it to 128 at Joe DeLeone.
Around, and somebody will.
At Joe DeLeone, at Sanderson Radio, at Hack City Pod on Twitter. Hit the subscribe button, drop a comment, hit the like button. We'll be back with more. Enjoy the rest of your week.